continue and possibly end our discussion on synchronization today, and might start with the next topic. So this last part is not something which is like related to some new feature in the CUDA programming language. This is more like different situations that you encounter in your applications while parallelizing programs. Some of these are very specific to GPUs, but some of them are also applicable in the context of other parallel paradigms such as multi-core parallelism or even distributed systems. So the idea is that we identify certain parallelism patterns or synchronization patterns, and these patterns require synchronizing in a particular manner. If we have not looked at these patterns, or if we have not studied these patterns, we might end up re-engineering the synchronization pattern, or we might not know how to optimize it well. But if you start looking at your applications from these perspective, from the perspective of these patterns, you will be able to figure out that, oh, this fits into this regime, and therefore I will be able to apply this particular optimization. This is very similar in spirit with respect to that if you have an associative computation, you will be able to probably cast it as a reduction, right, as a hierarchical way of processing. And in fact, that is one of the pattern that we are going to see. So once you have such a pattern, it can be, first of all, applied to multiple such patterns, multiple such scenarios. But the second aspect of that is that we might be able to even optimize it, in the sense that if you know a particular pattern and you want to apply it in the context of, let's say, GPUs, you will be able to optimize it away, right? And as soon as you optimize this basic processing, it will be applicable to all the applications which are making use of this pattern. There are other aspects of identifying such patterns in your applications. For example, if I know that certain pattern exists, but there is something additional which is specific to my application, I might be able to customize this to suit my application. For example, I know that it is reduction can be performed if the operation is associative, but maybe in my application, the computation is not only associative but also commutative. Then we discussed that you could actually perform multiple different types of reductions. You could reorder the computation in different ways, and that was giving us leeway, because it can help you optimize a particular process specific to an architecture. For example, we might want to improve the coalescing of accesses, where consecutive threads are actually looking at consecutive elements, and then they are, let's say, reducing with respect to I and I plus, let's say, n by 2, n by 4, n by 8, rather than I and I plus 1. Right? So that is going to be more better coalesced with respect to GPU-based processing. So let's look at those patterns. So I have divided this discussion into 3 different kinds of patterns that people encounter, and this you will most probably not see in any book. This is more out of research papers as well as some experience. So I'm going to talk in terms of barrier-based synchronization, which can be applicable in different scenarios. For example, the first one is when you want to have totally disjoint accesses, right? The second one is when you have overlapping accesses. And the third one is also overlapping, but the overlap is benign. Right? So we'll discuss what each of these means. So let's go back to our example of pushing elements into the work list. Right? So you have a work list like this here, and different threads want to insert different elements and different number of elements into this work list. There are different ways in which we could do that, and some of that we have already discussed, but let's complete that story. So one of the easy ways was we said that I could have one atomic per element that I want to insert. So each thread performs one atomic using atomic increment into this work list. There is a counter or the work list index which is going to increase which defines the offset within the work list where I'm going to insert the elements. If I have E number of elements, then I need E number of atomic instructions to make sure that these elements get inserted in parallel across all the threads. The other important point that we should note by looking at these different colors is that it's not guaranteed that the elements inserted by a thread are going to be consecutive, because I'm just using atomic increment. And so that is what was using atomic increment to insert elements. The other way using which we could reduce the number of atomics, and not only that, but we could also make sure that the elements of a thread are always consecutive, was using what? The question is that instead of using atomic increment, which does not ensure that the elements of a thread are consecutive in the work list, we could use something else to make sure that the elements are consecutive. What was that? Okay, Ebenezer is saying atomic add. Right. So using atomic add, we could ensure that I reserve more space than one element, exactly the number of elements that I want to insert. So that not only ensures that the elements are consecutive for a thread, but also ensures that the number of atomics get reduced. And that's very interesting. So if I have T number of threads which want to insert elements, then I just requires order T atomics. And assuming that E is going to be much larger than T, this is going to be definitely beneficial in both aspects, right? And then there was some other way in which we studied that you could insert elements into a work list. What was that?
Prefix sum.
Prefix sum. Okay, sounds good. All right. So prefix sum allowed us to perform some sort of hierarchical computation using order log T barriers, and that allowed us to insert elements exactly in the same manner as one atomic per thread. That is, the elements are consecutive, but we didn't have to use atomics here. You could perform log n steps. We had to use barriers, but then it ensured that the elements are consecutive, and we are able to have those inserted properly in parallel. So these were different ways in which we could talk about when the elements that get inserted by different threads are appearing at different positions. You want these insertions to happen in parallel independently, right? It doesn't happen that both the threads are inserting at the same position. Right? So this is a very common scenario. Although we have taken it in the context of work list, you'll be able to see that such a scenario can also occur at other places. Yeah, and this barrier-based prefix sum pictorially could look like this, where there are different computations happening. I have taken the example of plus as such, but you can think of other. Well, in this case, since we are talking about the offsets to be computed, it will still remain plus. So yeah, there won't be any other operation. And then these horizontal lines are different barriers that we need to worry about. So let's come to the second part. The second part is more complicated, where the accesses are no longer disjoint. What does that mean? That means that two threads might actually race for the same memory location, right? So not that it was not happening earlier. For example, that's the reason why you required atomics or prefix sum, to ensure that they are going to the different places. But I'll take an example, and that will probably make it clearer. So let's take a similar example where threads are trying to own a set of elements, not insert into a work list, right? So there are different elements, different objects. Let's say there are only 10 objects, but you have 1,000 elements, 1,000 threads, sorry. And 1,000 threads, I want to find out 10 such threads which are going to own those elements. What does owning mean? That means that the next processing associated with that particular element is going to be done by that particular thread. Right? This, I don't know if you have encountered such a situation ever, or can you think of a scenario where threads need to own certain elements, or there are more number of threads but very few number of elements for which such a processing might be required? Any suggestions?
So in that assignment 3 question, we can think of that we had n vehicles correspond to n threads, and then m toll points correspond to n, these m elements.
Sure, that's a good observation. Where you have more number of vehicles and probably fewer number of m entries, and that is probably going to require you to own a particular element. That is possible. Any other scenarios?
Sir, other graph problems where the number of nodes is less, but the number of processing done on those nodes might be high. So multiple nodes can help with the data increment on that, but the final processing can only be done by select number of nodes.
Right. So that is another way in which you could have more number of elements into the graph. Sorry, fewer elements into the graph, but more processing elements, which is the threads. So that is another way. Krishna Vamsi is suggesting increment in histogram bins, where the number of bins is much smaller, whereas the number of threads is probably going to be much larger, maybe equal to the number of overall elements. That's possible. Sanket has suggested voting. This voting has similarity with this histogram, right? So you have different bins corresponding to different parties or different, let's say, politicians, and you want to insert appropriate things into a particular vote bank, right? So therefore, the number of voters might turn out to be large, but the number of voting elements might turn out to be very small. So these are all very good examples that you have suggested. I am also going to show you one small example. So yeah, the example is probably going to come a couple of animations away. But if you want to own such elements, one of the ways in which that I can perform some sort of I can use some sort of an atomic, right? What does that atomic do? Any suggestions? Or if you have another way in which this can be owned, can somebody tell that?
Sir, one was to use atomics, the other is to have dedicated threads for that particular element.
Right. If you have dedicated threads, yeah.
So instead of having multiple threads using atomic add to increment that or change that value, we will have just one thread which will change that value finally.
Sure. Sure. So if you have number of threads equal to number of elements, then there is no problem. Then you don't get into this synchronization even. So assuming that we have more number of threads, then how will the atomic help?
So in that case, multiple threads will be attempting to change one particular element. So to avoid a race condition there, we'll use atomics for that.
Correct, but how?
So you can have some the total number of instructions that needed to be processed for that particular element, and then use a counter. So if counter not equal to n, atomic add of use atomic add to perform an instruction or something.
I see. Okay. Okay. I see. Yeah. Okay. Piyush has mentioned something that only one thread is allowed to access element. Yes, only one thread is allowed to access element, just that the fewer number of elements are present, more number of threads. And there is, yeah, so if it so happens that the elements are numbered from 0 to 10 and the threads are numbered from 0 to 1000, You could use thread ID to make sure that certain only 0 to 10 threads are allowed to access these elements. But typically the way it will happen is that you are going to have a different numbering for the elements and different numbering for the threads. And therefore it might be difficult to do this one-to-one mapping with respect to that. One suggestion that is given by Shagnik is that we could possibly have a lock on an element. How will you use that lock, Shagnik? Using atomics, implement the lock until the time element own the lock, other threads don't use it. Sure. Okay, so I understand that it might require slightly. I think it. The way I was thinking about it is that you own the element and then go on processing, or you don't own the element and don't process, right? So it's not that there is a blocking happening. But yeah, in some application, it's possible that that element might get held by a particular thread for some time, and then somebody else might get it. That is also another. So the way I was thinking about it, and I'll explain it in that manner, is that there are threads, there are elements they want to own, they want to race, and so on. It doesn't matter which thread gets which element. It's just that exactly one thread is going to process each element. Right, and what they are going to do is to have some sort of a lock. We'll use Shagnik's idea. It's just that it won't be a blocking lock. It will simply be more like, I want to set a particular value. So let's say that these are all unlocked elements. I'm going to set from 0 to 1, that is unlock to lock, and whichever thread gets the lock is going to process that particular element. The others are just going to go ahead, in the sense that they are probably going to wait for these 10 elements to get processed and so on. So that is how I was thinking about it. And then they all merge, and then they do the final process, further processing. Okay, so this changing from unlocked to locked state can actually be done using a single atomic instruction. So whichever thread sees the value as 0, the return value as 0, that will be able to take advantage of this and start processing. So that is one way in which that can be done. There are other ways in which that can be also programmed, and I'll mention to you this kind of processing, which is termed as race and resolved in literature. What does this do? It has a 3-step process. By the way, this is not, okay, let me first explain that. The first step performs a non-atomic marking, which means that the threads are just going haywire to just start marking something, right? So what does that marking mean? That means that threads need to put their some sort of a stamp onto the element, and multiple threads are going to stamp the same element. That is possible. And how does one know whether this thread gets it or the other thread? That stamp is going to be ensuring that. So what is that stamp? Well, it needs to be some sort of a unique ID which is available with a thread, which is naturally marked to a thread ID. Right? So each element is associated with an owner element. So each thread which is interested in certain number of items is going to mark those items. Right? Okay, so each thread which is interested in those multiple elements is going to mark those items using its thread ID. Right? Assuming that these are all primitive types, these writes are anyway going to be atomic, so you don't have to worry about synchronization. Then there is a barrier. After this, there is a prioritized marking. What does prioritized marking mean? Is that I have marked certain elements into this array, right, with my thread ID as a thread. I'm going to check again these thread IDs. And if any of these is marked by a higher priority thread, if any of these elements is marked by a higher priority thread, I'll say that, okay, I lose my ownership. The higher priority thread is going to get this, and I don't mark it anymore. The higher priority thread will again look for the same, that these are my elements and I am interested in these, but is it marked by somebody else which is having higher priority? If it is marked by higher priority, then I lose my ownership. The highest priority thread, whichever has marked, is going to get those elements. So how do you define the priority amongst threads? Well, these are all same threads, right? So in the sense that these are all very similar, and therefore you could just have some very simple way of deciding the priority, which could be just based on thread ID. Whichever has lower thread ID, maybe it gets priority, or higher thread ID might get priority, and so on. So that is a prioritized marking. Right? So I check, and if I have something which is marked by higher priority, I disown the elements. I no longer participate in the race. But if it is marked by a lower priority thread, then I go and mark it. That, oh, I am having high priority, let me go and mark it, and so on. That is the second step. And in the third step, there is a read-only phase where nobody marks anything. Each thread again checks if I have ownership of all the elements. And if I have, then I go ahead and start processing those elements. Right? So whatever I have explained, is there any question, confusion, concern about that?
Sir, so in the marking stage, for each element, it is a linked list, right? Or so if multiple elements, if multiple threads are marking it, we need to keep a track of all threads that have marked, right? So it will, or are we overwriting the mark by another thread?
Right.
And if you're overwriting, then how do we know whether another thread is marked for the prioritized mark case?
Correct. So that's a good question. In fact, that is something which I wanted to explain early, but I thought that let the question come from. So this marking is actually happening in parallel by multiple threads, right? And I'm also checking, right? So I'm first checking if I have marked. If it is higher priority, I don't mark. If it is lower priority, I go and mark it. Now, this going and marking can be done by multiple higher priority threads, right? So let's say that it was marked by thread number 5, and let's say that higher thread ID means higher priority. So thread 6 and 7 might see it in the prioritized marking phase that this element is marked by thread 5, which has lower priority. Let me go and mark it. Who will succeed? Well, it is all happening in parallel. Either thread 6 might succeed or thread 7 might succeed. Succeed meaning they both will write, but somebody will overwrite the other. Therefore, in the third phase, I need to check who is the real owner of this particular element. Right? So it's possible that 6 or 7, both of them might mark. One of them will succeed in the sense that one of them will override the other, and that thread is going to get the priority. So it's not guaranteed that thread 7 is always going to find its marking intact in the final phase. It's just that there is some small priority given, which is not guaranteed to work all the time. But since threads are similar, it's more to figure out that who should own those set of elements, right? If you want to own a single element, then it is about the first part, that I'm interested only in a single element. But when you are interested in multiple elements, then such a priority scheme might turn out to be reaching some sort of convergence a little faster. Any other concerns here?
So there needs to be this thing. We need to ensure that between the time one thread reads and another thread writes, so if 6 and 7 read at the same time, then if 6 writes, then 7 should read the updated value, right? So how do we ensure that part?
Yeah, no, so that is not guaranteed in this case. That's what I was saying, that these two threads are in a way similar. I mean, I'm giving this priority more from the perspective of this particular synchronization scheme. It is not decided by the application. So it doesn't matter whether 6 processes it or 7. What is important is that if there are, let's say, 4 elements to be processed and some of them are shared between 6 and 7, at least one of them should be able to own, right? So that there is some useful processing being done. Otherwise, what can happen is that if there are 4 elements and 4 threads, and all 4 want to process, all 4 threads want to process all 4 elements, maybe they lock one of them, right? And then they check in the second phase whether I have locked. Well, unlikely that they would have locked all of them. Then they will again try to race with each other in the next phase. Again, they will not see that they have locked all 4 phases, all 4 elements, and they will just keep doing this in a live locked manner, right? To reduce this particular mechanism has been suggested, where you give priority to different threads, and based on something. It could be based on thread ID, it could be based on the number of elements I want to mark, and so on. But once you have this fixed total order amongst priorities, then slowly things will start converging towards higher priority threads is the expectation. It is not guaranteed, definitely, because things are still happening in a non-deterministic manner. So it's possible that thread 6 might start owning all the elements, although 6 and 7 are competing because of the way the threads are scheduled. And therefore, in the final phase, thread 6 just goes ahead. But that is okay, as long as some thread goes ahead. That is the expectation. Does that seem reasonable? Any suggestions here?
Sir, will the priority change as the number of elements allocated to a particular thread is increasing? So if 7 already has some number of elements allocated to it, will its priority decrease and so on?
This particular scheme doesn't change the priority dynamically based on that. But if you have to implement that, that will be tricky. I mean, more complicated. Reason being that as you own the elements, you want to change the priority, but it needs to be also informed to other people, other threads, that your priority has increased. That will require you to possibly have a priority array and so on, and then synchronization of that will also come into play, because the other threads will possibly see older priority versus newer priority. So all of this is going to happen. Yeah, it seems to be possible. In fact, it might turn out to be an interesting way to improve the convergence rate further. Convergence here means that you should be able to figure out quickly that some thread should be able to own the elements and should go ahead and do useful processing, rather than getting into this race all the time and not doing any useful processing, because you are interested in locking multiple elements. You are not interested in single element now. You are interested in locking multiple elements. That's the reason. So one of the important applications of this, so this is called as race and resolve. They are racing with each other and then trying to resolve this mechanism, where there is an ANDing happening. What does that ANDing mean? That I am interested in this element and this element and this element, and I cannot proceed until I have locked all 3 elements or 4 elements. That is what is ANDing. So if I lock only a fewer than 3 elements, for example, I'll not proceed, in the sense that I'll just unlock these 2 elements and let other threads proceed, right? So whosoever is able to win is going to go ahead and lock it. The question here is, if I have, let's say, some k number of elements, right? The question is, if I have k number of elements and then I have n number of threads, which is much larger, each of the threads is interested in 0 or more number of elements. If you follow this 3-phase race and resolve, is it guaranteed that at least one thread gets to process its elements? That is the question. I'll repeat the question. If you follow this 3-phase race and resolve, the way we have discussed, where the first phase is non-atomic marking, the second phase is prioritized marking, where you check and give priority to the higher numbered threads. And the third phase is read only, where there is no marking. I just check. If I own all the elements that I'm interested in, then I go ahead. Otherwise, I unlock my elements and don't do anything. This 3-phase scheme, does it ensure that in the third phase or after the third phase, at least one thread is going to succeed in processing its elements? Any suggestions? Krishna Vamsi is asking, why such a complicated mechanism? Why not use the first come first served thing? Sure, we'll come to that. Okay, so let's get to Krishna Vamsi's question. Which is first come first serve? Right? What is the order which you will use for first come first serve? Because threads are always there. As far as elements are concerned, those are also there. If you want to reorder them in the priority of their thread IDs or number of elements they want to lock, etc., that is possible. But remember that this is going to add sequentiality to the processing. The threads which are probably going to access different elements, right, independent elements, these should be allowed to access those in parallel, which won't be guaranteed if we just use first come first served or some sort of order in the processing. So we would like to process these also in parallel. Okay, so nobody has told me if this is guaranteed. Well, this particular scheme doesn't guarantee that. It's possible that multiple threads might come together, they race and try to resolve, but they are not able to resolve because let's say there are 2 elements and or maybe 3 elements, and 2 of them get locked by all of them get locked by the lower priority thread. In the prioritized marking scheme, the higher priority 2 threads might say that, oh, this is locked by lower priority, so let me lock these elements by myself. So let's say thread 6 and thread 7, they lock the 3 elements at their IDs, and it so happens that they both are interested in all 3. So some of them are locked by thread 6, some of them are locked by thread 7. So in the final phase, when they check, neither thread number 6 nor thread number 7 sees that all of those are actually marked by me, and therefore both of them will relinquish control over the 3 elements, and therefore none of them will be able to proceed with the useful computation. So this doesn't guarantee that. It so happens that in practice, you will be able to get some work done, assuming that the overlaps across threads are sparse. That is, there aren't too many overlaps. There is some independent work across threads, and at times there are some overlaps, in which case this scheme still practically works out. Any questions on this one? Okay, so the application that I was talking about is mentioned on the left-hand side, that I want to own cavities in the Dillon image refinement. So what is a Dillon image refinement? Can anybody tell which subject this appears in and so on? Okay, so those of you who have probably studied graphics or something related to graphics, it could be in automotive engineering also, where you are given an object, let's say a car or a fish or something. It could be as well a computer, and you want to triangulate it. Why do you want to triangulate it? Because you want to operate on this object. You want to change it from, let's say, 2D to 3D, not 2D to 3D, sorry. There is a transformation that you want to perform from, let's say, you want to rotate the image, right? So you don't want to do it pixel by pixel, but you can triangulate it, or you can use quadrilaterals and so on. So one of the ways in which you triangulate is called as Delaunay triangulation. So I don't know, you might have seen such images when you see a 3D view of, let's say, some car or some object. So once you have triangulated this, each triangle, I mean, it's not, I mean, there are multiple ways in which you can triangulate it. And some ways of, so this triangulation forms a mesh. So although there are multiple ways in which you can triangulate, it turns out that some triangulations are better than the others. What is meant by better? There is some quality criteria which you might use. For example, one of the quality criteria could be that no angle in a triangle should be less than 30 degrees. This could be my quality criteria. Or that there should not be any obtuse angle above certain number, right? Above some angle. Right? That could be one quality criteria. Or you can have quality criteria based on the length of the sides of the triangle and so on. So those could be different ways in which you can put a quality criteria. So those triangles which do not adhere to this quality criteria, let's call them bad triangles. So I'm going to use those bad triangles and look at its neighborhood. So Delaunay mesh refinement, what it does is that it looks at the neighborhood of the bad triangles, consider this as a whole, and then retriangulates this neighborhood. Right? There is a specific way in which that gets done. I might show you that graphic later if we reach graph algorithms. So I retriangulate that, which means that the triangulation is now going to change. And Delaunay showed that if you continue doing this, because some of these new triangles might actually be bad, but if you continue doing this, then eventually it converges and you get a good quality mesh. Right? So one way of doing it is Delaunay mesh refinement. There are other refinements which are possible. Now, how is this related? Well, this identifying the bad triangle, that could be done very nicely in parallel, because this is a read-only phase. You are given a mesh and each thread is given a triangle. You just check if certain quality criteria is met or not. So you identify bad triangles in parallel. Now, using this bad triangle, you want to identify the neighborhood. That neighborhood is called as a cavity. So your identification of this cavity can also be done in parallel. In fact, you will have the neighborhood information with you. This is very similar to that you have a graph and there are certain neighbors of this graph. Right? In this case, each triangle is going to have maximum 3 neighbors and so on. So identification of cavity can also be done in parallel, but it's possible that if 2 bad triangles are nearby, the cavities might overlap with each other. And therefore, I cannot refine these 2 cavities simultaneously. The one thread which is trying to modify should modify the cavity, and then the next thread should go and try to modify the cavity. So this requires owning the triangles, owning the neighborhood, owning all the elements inside the cavity. That is where this race and resolve scheme gets used, and that is where it is coming from. But there could be other situations in which you can think about it. For example, if you have some sort of a stencil computation where I'm interested in ij computation based on i-1j or ij+1 and so on. So these are the different neighbors based on which I am able to process this particular ij in the next step. This might require you to own the cavities, own the neighborhood, if you are performing the updates in situ. In situ meaning right in place. In such cases also you might want to own the elements, because you don't want somebody else, some other thread, to change those elements in parallel. Right? So this is another application where this can get used. So this was about ANDing. I'm interested in all the neighborhood to be locked before I process the neighborhood, because I'm changing the neighborhood. The other way is OR mechanism, where I'm interested in elements, but I can process them one by one. If that is the case, one way is I can use an atomic lock per element. Alternatively, I can also use race and resolve mechanism in a 2-phase manner. In the first phase, the threads just race without any synchronization between them, and they just mark different elements with their thread IDs. Then they have a barrier, and in the second phase, they check whether my thread ID is present with respect to a particular element. And whichever element has my ID, I know that I own that element, and I start processing that element. This particular OR mechanism, it always works. There is no such thing that, because it doesn't matter which thread does it, and at least one thread which is interested is guaranteed to have that mechanism, which is not there in the race and resolve ANDing part. But the ORing part, the OR mechanism, ensures this particular element. And this can be very useful. For example, I want to insert, let's say, unique elements into the worklist. Okay. So we'll go back to our example of inserting elements. Multiple threads might insert the same element. That is possible. But if I want to insert unique elements, right, because there is an overlap now, then there is a possibility. For example, in case of shortest path algorithm, there is A to C edge and B to C edge. Right? I am processing A to C as one thread and B to C as another thread, and both of them update the distance of C. Now, as soon as C's distance gets updated at different times, I need to insert C into the worklist because its distance has been updated, so it should now get processed so that it can propagate the information to its neighbors. Now, who will insert C? Well, since thread 1 updated C's distance, thread 1 will insert C into the work list. Thread 2 will also insert C into the work list. But I don't want that. I want only one of them to insert. In such cases, I can use an OR mechanism or race and resolve to make sure that they race amongst each other, thread 1 and thread 2. Then they have a barrier, and in the second phase, which is read only, they just check which thread has succeeded, which thread has won this race and resolve, and only that thread will insert C into the work list, and that will ensure that there is a single copy of C into the work list. Right? So there are multiple situations in which such synchronization pattern can also be useful. Again, these are a little complicated patterns in the sense that unless you have very non-parallel application, you will not encounter such situations, but you should be definitely aware of them. The third part, any questions on this race and resolve? Otherwise, I'll go to the benign overlaps part. Okay, so the third is a rather peculiar pattern, which is called as benign overlap. What does that mean? Any suggestions? I mean, those who know the meaning of benign, you might be able to guess what this could be. Non-harmful to the algorithm, Parth is suggesting. That's a good way of defining it. Right. Anybody wants to give any suggestions on where you have encountered or you would encounter a non-harmful overlap?
Only reads.
Only reads. Okay, sure. Yes. Only reads is definitely non-harmful. But something more interesting than that. So if it is only reads, then there is no data race. So we don't have to worry about synchronization altogether. So that is correct. But let's say that there is some write happening. So there is a race, but that race is benign or it's not harmful. What does that mean? I mean, where do you encounter such a situation? If all the threads are writing the same value, that's a very good observation part. Have you encountered such a situation ever? That all the threads are writing the same value to the same memory location?
So if it's just a flag and multiple threads are just trying to set the flag.
Correct. So your initializations are typically of this type, right? So we have written codes where we say that if a thread id x.x equals 0, then sum equal to 0. That is the initialization of sum. What if I don't have that? If I don't have that condition and just have sum equal to 0, then there is a barrier. Right? Will that cause any problem? Well, from the perspective of performance, there might be some issue in the sense that all the threads are writing to the same memory location and so on. But from the perspective of correctness or application semantics, there is no problem if multiple threads want to write a primitive type, the same value, sum equal to 0. Right? So I can actually remove that condition, and we have encountered such a situation. I'm going to show you a more elaborate example. Right? So, so threads are updating again shared variables to the same value. That is what Parth had suggested. One way of doing it is I use atomics. If these are not primitive types, right, then I should be using some sort of atomics. But I could, if these are primitive types, then I could just use without atomics because these are the same values. And this occurs when you are doing level by level breadth first search, for example. So I again go back to that example where I'm not talking about shortest paths in the weighted sense, but shortest path in the unweighted sense, where it becomes breadth first search. So there is update from A to C and update from B to C happening simultaneously. So they are going level by level and they are updating C's distance. Is it possible that C's distance, if there is a race between these two updates, could be different coming from A and coming from B? Okay, it can't be different because they are doing level by level. So both A and B are at the same level, and that's why they are getting processed in parallel. And they are updating the distance of C, and therefore C's distance has to be 1 greater than these two. and therefore they are actually writing the same value. In such cases, in a general graph algorithm, for example, you would have required an atomic instruction there, let's say atomic min or something. But in this case, you know that it's the same value, and therefore you don't need to worry about it, and it's a primitive type. So you can actually do away with the atomic instruction and just go ahead without synchronization. So such patterns do exist. There are other properties, some of them, for example, associativity we have encountered and exploited. But monotonicity is another property that comes up. What does monotonicity mean? What is monotonicity? Is it some sort of a tonic, monotonic, or something else? It's monotone, right? So monotone meaning that the same pattern throughout. Same pattern throughout would be probably okay in the English sense, but not in the algebraic sense. Arihanth is suggesting strictly increasing or decreasing. Right. So monotonicity means that it is the computation is increasing the value or decreasing the value in one direction, but not both. Right. So that is what we usually consider as a monotonic computation. So what does that mean? Right. So in our discussion. So let's consider threads which are updating the distances in the shortest path computation. In that case, if you look at the distance of a particular element, that is always reducing. Technically, I mean, semantically, it should always be reducing. For example, if the original value is 10, if I'm using atomic min, I'll set it to, let's say, 7. I'll possibly set it to 5. But once I have set it to 5, I'll not go and update it to 7 because I'm using atomic min. Right? So the values are always reducing. This is a monotonically reducing computation. However, if I don't use atomics, we have seen that this poses some problem, right? So what is the problem? T5 wants to update the distance to 5 and T7 wants to update the distance to 7. And if I don't use atomic min, and if I just do a blind update, then it's possible that T5 might update first and then T7 might update later. And therefore the final value might change from 10 to 5 to 7. And that can turn out to be a wrong. What did we call this problem as? Okay, we call this as lost update problem. Right? So the value might turn out to be 7, which is not a good thing from the application semantics perspective. This is going to compute an incorrect information. However, if you know that such a computation, this underlying computation is monotonic, what you can do is have some sort of a topology driven computation. Topology driven meaning that all the edges are going to get processed again in the next iteration. If this guarantee is there, which is what happens in Bellman-Ford processing, then you can correct that error in the next iteration. Because in the next iteration, again, if this T5 is active, you are not using any work list, all the threads are saying that all the elements are active all the time. That means all the nodes are active or all the edges are active all the time. Then T5 will see that there is value 7 here and it will go and update it. T7 will see that the value is 7 and not update it in the next iteration. And therefore, the value is guaranteed to go from 10 to 7 to 5 eventually, even if 5 was overwritten by 7 in some previous iteration. So this is where the exploiting of algebraic properties comes into play. There are other properties, for example, idempotency. What does idempotency mean? I'll just take a couple of minutes to finish this. What does idempotency mean? What is an idempotent computation? Discrete maths. Maybe it was long ago, right? So idempotent computation means that whether you apply a function onto A of A is A. No, this is not idempotent computation. You are close, but this is not the correct definition of idempotent computation. The correct definition is that whether you apply op onto the element A once or more number of times, it is the same, right? So f of x is same as f of x or fi of x, where I is greater than 0, not greater than 1, right? So if I have such a computation, where do you encounter this? Well, many places, right? But I'll give you one small example in the interest of time. Again, going back to our shortest path example, if there is some distance update which is happening, update by multiple threads, right, in our shortest path computation, then it can get into the work list multiple number of times, right? So this is what we said, I would like to avoid using race and resolve. So that is one way in which you can avoid. But if you know that whether you process this Z element once or multiple number of times, it's again going to do just redundant computation, right? So what you are going to do is to process its outgoing edges of Z in the next iteration. But it doesn't matter whether you update it once or more number of times, it's okay, right? So this computation is monotonic from that perspective, and therefore it is all right not to remove that Z multiple times, multiple occurrences of Z from the work list. So it might still be okay, right? In some applications, it will not be okay. You need to have unique elements into the work list or whatever you are processing, that you have to update it exactly once. But in some applications, it is all right to process it multiple times by multiple threads, in which case you are taking advantage of this idempotent computation, right? Associativity we have seen, that is prefix sum. So that kind of completes. There is a little bit of scatter gather where you scatter elements across and then gather elements together. For example, if we said that you could possibly allow holes while pushing elements into a work list, and then you avoid all the synchronization altogether if you allow those holes. But if you are unable to allow these holes, you could possibly do this as first part, and then you might gather all these elements, push these elements together, right? So that is called as scatter and gather. Such a computation can also be very helpful in some patterns. In fact, yeah, these need to be separated by a barrier though. Many of the parallel processing systems do support this scatter gather as APIs. For example, those of you who are aware of MPI, you will find that there is scatter and gather across different machines. You can scatter elements and gather elements from multiple machines. So overall, we looked at lots of different aspects of synchronization, and I hope that you got a good glimpse of what synchronization is about in the context of GPUs, and you can see that it's actually very interesting compared to, we have this embarrassingly parallel computation where everything is independent, right? So the main crux comes in, or the main bottlenecks come in when you have some sort of synchronization. So with that, we'll complete our discussion on synchronization, and we'll start with maybe the next topic in the next week. Any questions? All right, so we'll stop here. Sorry about the delay today. We'll meet next week.